because it's not ordered like a narrative. It's not ordered directly. It doesn't flow like the Gospels where you have a beginning, middle, and end. And actually, after chapter 10 in Proverbs, there's really no groupings. There's just random proverbs that get spat at you sort of from all different directions, dealing with all different topics. And what we have to do is, instead of just opening the book and talking about one proverb, we have to sort of do the work ourselves of grouping them by topics. And that's what I've been doing every week, to see what these proverbs say holistically. So if you go through and you look at all the proverbs as they talk about a particular topics, be it anger or money or family or marriage, you can then group them together. And from there, you start to get a sketch of what Proverbs is saying about how to be wise in regards to this particular subject, whatever that subject may be. So I put them in your bulletin, and you'll see that inside the bulletin there are random proverbs. It kind of jumps around the book. And what I've tried to do as best as possible is group them by topic. And today, the topic is friendship. How to be wise, how to be a wise friend. And I honestly, this was one of the more difficult messages or sermons for me to put together as I thought about it, because look, you can do a little experiment, and I'll tell you why this is so difficult. If you think in your life right now that you have at least one healthy friendship, raise your hand. At least one healthy friendship, just one. You can raise your hand. Everybody, okay, see, everybody who was paying attention just raised their hand. Now, let's close in prayer. We're done. Actually, no. See, the book of Proverbs, it assumes some things about our lives, and one of them that it assumes is that our friendships are not going to be always wise friendships, that we're not going to always be able to be a wise friend to others, and others aren't going to be able to be wise friends to us because the human condition is insufficient. Proverbs assumes, the whole Bible knows this, that human beings in and of themselves are insufficient to give the type of friendship to others that the book of Proverbs says we ought to. And I'll walk through that in a second. I'm going to walk through what Proverbs says is a wise friendship. There's 3 components to it. And then I'm going to give an illustration for it. But see, here's the best way that I could sum this up. The majority of our friendships, if we're honest, if we're really honest with ourselves, the majority of our friendships are what I would like to call Pop-Tart friendships. I'll let that sink in. If you're from the United States, you know what a Pop-Tart is. I'm guessing by some people smiling that you know what a Pop-Tart is. And for the uninitiated, here's what I mean by a Pop-Tart friendship. If you don't know what a Pop-Tart is, a Pop-Tart is a completely artificial breakfast pastry meant for children. And it's comprised of dough, some sort of dough that's baked, and it's got icing on the top. It's very thin, and inside is what you might consider to be a jelly-like substance. I don't really know what it's made of, but it's a fruit substance, and it's meant to be eaten at breakfast for children. Now, why do I tell you this? I'll get to my point, trust me. I have had many Pop-Tart friendships in my life, and this is how it is. See, you don't know, but when I was a young child, I loved Pop-Tarts. Loved them. The interesting thing about my Pop-Tart habit was that I would eat Pop-Tarts morning, noon, and night. There wasn't a time of day that I wouldn't want a Pop-Tart. I'd eat it all the time. I loved them. And there's something else weird about the way I ate Pop-Tarts. I didn't put them in the toaster and heat them up the way you're supposed to. Hence the name Pop-Tart. You put it in the toaster and it pops up. I just popped them in my mouth. I ate them when they were sort of in their uncooked state a little bit, at room temperature or cold. Very, very weird. My mom thought I was very strange. And I would eat Pop-Tarts like crazy. Now, why do I tell you this? Because I had a friend. And when I was about 9 years old, and this guy's name, my friend, was Isaac. Here's my Pop-Tart friendship with Isaac. The summer when I was about 9 years old, Isaac and I, we would do everything we could in our neighborhood. We would bike together on the streets. There was a lake in our neighborhood. We'd go swimming. We'd play basketball. We'd play tennis. We did everything together, me and Isaac. Everything that summer. We were the best of friends. And so much so that my mom would have to come out in the nighttime when his sun went down and say, come in, it's time to come inside. You can't play with Isaac all day. He was the best friend. But one time, I went to Isaac's house. We would change places where we went for lunch. Sometimes at my house, sometimes at his house. We rode our bikes to his house and we went in to eat lunch. And unbeknownst to me, his mother was going to make us lunch. But I looked in his cupboard and I saw a box of Pop-Tarts. Okay? So I went in and I said, Isaac's my friend. He's off doing something. I think he was in the bathroom or something. I said, surely Isaac's my friend. I can enjoy one of his Pop-Tarts. And these weren't just regular Pop-Tarts. I know you think this is going nowhere, but it is going somewhere. These were brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts, which were my absolute favorites. So I took them out of the bag in their uncooked state, and I started to try to eat one. Isaac walked into the kitchen, saw me, and he screamed at me. He said, how stupid are you? Why are you eating that? My mom's going to cook us lunch. What's wrong with you? And not only that, but he saw that I hadn't toasted the Pop-Tart effectively enough, and he starts screaming at me about that and says, that's disgusting. What's wrong with you? Why would you eat it that way? And all I remember is that he would scream and scream. He went on for about 5 minutes, which seems like a lifetime for a 9-year-old. So what did I do? I threw the Pop-Tart back in his face. I got on my bike and went home and I sulked. And my mom came in sometime later and she said, why aren't you outside playing with Isaac? And I said, Isaac's no longer my friend. I hate him. I'm never going to talk to him again. And I never did until the end of the summer, which is like a lifetime for a 9-year-old, right? Now, why did I tell this stupid story? Hopefully, so that you can start asking yourself whether you have Pop-Tart friendships. See, what I did as a 9-year-old is no different than what I do as an adult. I had conditions on my friend, and he had conditions on me. And the minute that he did not live up to his end of the bargain, the minute that he didn't meet his conditions, the minute that he chastised me for my ways, what did I do? I cut him off. Now, why do I say this? Because friendships are unlike any other relationship. You can hate your family, but they're still your family. You can run away from your family for a time, but they're still your family. They're still blood. You can even not like your spouse. You could be in a fight, but they're still your husband. They're still your wife. You can't get away from them. But friendships, because we are inherently selfish people, and because we have Pop-Tart friendships, we can cut people off. And that's what I did. I did it as a 9-year-old, and I've been doing it in almost every single relationship, every single friendship. If the friendship goes wrong, or if the other person doesn't live up to their end of the bargain, or if that person hurts me or offends me, cut them off. Defriend them. But see, Proverbs tells us that there's actually a way to have non-Pop-Tart friendships. There's a way to have wise friendships, and here's how you do it. And I'm going to call it the 3 C's of friendship, okay? And I'm borrowing this from a pastor who I greatly admire. He had 4. I'm saving you some time this morning, and I'm just going to do 3. Aren't I nice? Here's how to avoid Pop-Tart friendships. Here's how to avoid friendships with conditions and strings, friendships that you'll cut off the minute somebody wrongs you. Here's how we do it. First, I'll say all 3, and then I'll explain them, and then I'll give an illustration. If you want a wise friendship, Proverbs says, your friendship has to be caring, it has to be candid, and it has to be constant. It has to be caring, it has to be candid, and it has to be constant. And let me explain what I mean. First, caring. If you look at chapter 25, verse 20, the proverb says, whoever sings a song to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day and like vinegar on soda. What this means is, if you're a type of friend, it says whoever sings songs of joy, basically, to someone with a heavy heart, it means if you don't know or care about the situation of your friend, you'll never be able to be a true friend to them. If you approach your friendships and you don't regard where that other person is, the hurt that they're dealing with, and it says you just want to sing songs to them, you want to have a friendship based on your circumstances, regardless of theirs. It says that's not being caring. That's not being sensitive to the needs of the other person, to entering into their hurt. If you're not sensitive to that condition of the other person, what you're going to do is sing songs, and it says mix vinegar and soda, and it's not talking about Coca-Cola, it's talking about baking soda, which is mixing an alkaline and chemicals together that have a very powerful combination. It says that first, if you want your friendships to be wise, you have to approach the person and be sensitive to what they're dealing with, not sing songs of joy to them when they have a heavy heart. But secondly, you have to be, and this is a balance here, we have to do this, not only be caring, because there's some of you in this room I know who are very caring people, and you care about your friends, and you want them to protect them, you want to keep a bubble around them, you want them to be safe and happy, and you'll do anything you can do to do it. But Proverbs goes further, and it says, you can't just be caring, you have to be utterly candid. And here's what it means by candid. In chapter 27, verse 5, it says, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from what? His earnest counsel. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. See, for people who like to be caring, it's very difficult to also be candid. And being candid is when you can go to your friend and you can tell them, listen, this is something in your life that needs to change. It says you can give wounds to them. It says it's actually good to give them wounds. Better is it to give them wounds than to just empty kisses. And this is where the difficulty comes in, is balancing the ability to care for somebody, to see them with a heavy heart and to not sing songs of joy to them, to sit with them in their suffering, to sit with them in their pain and to care for their heart, to balance that with the ability to speak truth in love. And if you think about it in a friendship, you can only really be candid with your friend when you've first been caring. And you can only be truly caring about them when you've also been able to be candid. Your friends will love it. They'll say, okay, fine, give me the wounds. Or they may not love it. They'll accept it. They can only accept the wounds you and I give them because they know first that we first cared enough to sit with them in their heavy heart state. About being candid, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a beautiful essay on friendship, and he says it's better to be a nettle in the side of your friend than his echo. He says you can be an echo for your friend, but it will never help them if you just let them continue on in the way they are in their life. No, iron sharpens iron. God's got some path for them to be on. God has got a future self that He wants you to help hone them into. But the only way you can ever be truly candid with them is if you've first been caring and to balance that out. But here's the last C, and what I would call the most difficult, and it's being constant. It says this is probably the most difficult part of having a healthy, wise friendship. It says actually in chapter 20, verse 6, many a man proclaims his own steadfast love, but a faithful man who can find? It's saying basically it's going to be really, really hard for you and me to find friends. To find friends who care, to find friends who are candid, and to find friends who can be constant. In chapter 17, it says, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. And that sounds very awkward, and many commentators have wondered what this really means. Here's my translation for it. It doesn't mean that a friend loves you every single minute of every day. Because actually the proverb says that if you spend too much time in your neighbor's house, they'll get their fill of you and hate you. It doesn't mean that they love you at every moment. Here's a better translation. A constant friend is one who loves you through all seasons of your life. Now, this is the difficulty, and this is why this component, being constant, is so difficult, because can you truly say that in your friendships, as you think back to that healthy friendship when you first raised your hand, have you been constant? And can you be? Through every season of that friend's life, when you don't like the person, when you don't want to be around them, when they are a bore, when they are a grudge, when they are annoying, when they are sapping the life out of you, can you be constant? And yet can you be candid? And yet can you be caring? And let me give an illustration. That's the theory. Let me illustrate this for you, because I was up here with those 3 C's. Let me bring it down to a story. And we see this played out, the friendship in action, the 3 C's, in what is probably perhaps one of the most beautiful friendships that's ever written about. And it comes in the book of 1 Samuel. And it's the friendship of Jonathan with David. And if you don't know the story, here's the summary. David, of course, is the little guy who goes up to Goliath, and he slings the stone, and he kills Goliath, the Philistine. And David is triumphant in doing that. And Saul's the king at the time in 1 Samuel. And Saul's son is Jonathan. Now, David just killed Goliath, and he killed the Philistine army. And he says, David, come in, please. And he says, whose son are you? And David says, I'm the son of Jesse, of course. And Saul says, well, don't go anywhere. Stay with me. Because Saul knows he killed Goliath, so therefore he needs him around because it's militarily advantageous to him. here's what happens. If you look at 1 Samuel in chapter 18:1, it says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan, meaning Saul's son, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. This is caring, and this is why. It says the souls were knit together. Jonathan, the heir to the throne, actually takes off his robe and he gives it to David. He takes off his armor and he gives it to him. And their souls are knitted, and this is Jonathan's way of saying, I will utterly care for you. I'm knit to you, David. Whatever happens to you happens to me. If you suffer, I suffer. If you're sad, I'm sad. If you're hurting, I'm hurting. We're knit together. It's utterly caring, and yet their friendship is also amazingly candid. If you skip ahead in 1 Samuel chapter 20, here's how it plays out. David has gone off and he's won many, many wars, many battles. He's very successful. And Saul is very jealous of him. The king knows that God is favoring David, and he's so jealous that he tries to kill David. David escapes, and Jonathan and David meet. They're still friends, and they meet outside the city. And they're talking. And David, I put it in your outline, essentially David says, why is your dad trying to kill me? What did I do wrong? And Jonathan says, no, my dad's not trying to kill you. If he was, he would tell me first. And I'll paraphrase what David says here. You can look at it in the outline. David looks at Jonathan, and in essence he says this, Jonathan, are you stupid? Do you not see what's going on? And Jonathan says, no, my father would never do that. He would tell me before he does that. And David is utterly candid at him, and he looks at him and he says, wake up, Jonathan. You're not seeing reality. You don't know. He looks at this friend whose souls are knit together. They're deeply caring for one another. Whatever happens to one happens to the other. But at the same time, David cannot let Jonathan go on deceiving himself. He basically gives his friend a slap. And he says, wake up. Look at reality for what it is. Awesomely candid, but constant. Sometime later, Jonathan says, okay, fine, David. I'll go ask my father if he really wants to hurt you. So he goes into the city, and he has this elaborate plan, and he basically finds out, yes, Saul does want to kill David. So he goes back out, and he says, David, you need to run. You need to get out of here. But he says something very beautiful at the end. Jonathan asks to risk his life to let David escape with his life. And it says here, David rose from behind the stone heap, and he fell on his face to the ground, and he bowed 3 times, and they kissed one another, and they wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. That's constant. Basically, he's saying this, and this is what we have to say in our friendships. You may go far away, or you may be in an entirely different situation in your life than I am, but forever. Constant. He says, my children and your children, my age, God will always be between us. He says, here's our promise. Our souls are knit. And at the same time, we can be totally honest with one another. And at the same time, we will be completely constant with one another. And actually, David and Jonathan don't see each other again. And later on, when David finds out that Jonathan was killed, his great friend, whose soul was knit, who was utterly honest with him and totally constant, and he says this, he's so moved by the loss of his friend in 2 Samuel chapter 1 that he gets this song, and he says, Jonathan lies slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant you have been to me. Your love was extraordinary. A friend loves at all times. And as Proverbs 18 says, there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. There you go. So we're going to be wise in our friendships. And in order to be wise, Proverbs says you have to balance. You have to be totally caring. You have to be completely candid. And you have to be totally constant for friends, for friendship to blossom. And we see this in David and Jonathan, and it's a beautiful story. If I ended there this morning, I wouldn't be doing you justice. Because this is an amazing act of sacrifice that Jonathan is willing to give up his life for his friend David. But there's an even greater story about friendship. And it comes in John, the book of John, chapter 15. And it's when a descendant of David, Jesus, is talking about friendship. And he looks at his disciples, this ragtag group of people, and he says, John 15, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." Pause. He doesn't say when it's convenient. He says, "Do it as I have loved you." And he goes on in verse 13 to say, "Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends." He says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you." See, this morning, if trying to be those 3 C's, trying to be completely caring, utterly candid, and totally constant in your friendships, you will fail. The failure rate is going to be very high for us. And we'll revert back to our Pop-Tart friendships of selfishness, of inclusion, of cutting people off if it doesn't suit us anymore. Unless we put our hearts back onto what Jesus did for us. Jesus was totally caring, because he knew that he had to come into our situation, our heavy hearts, and he can't sing songs of joy. He's got to sing a song of death on the cross. Completely caring for us, because he comes down to our level and meets us where we are. But he's also completely candid. He says, "You didn't choose me. You in and of yourself did not choose me. You don't love me. You will kill me. You will betray me." He says, "You are so broken and you are so lost, and all of your friendships revolve around you, and you want everybody to do the dance around you in your life. That's how you've lived." He's totally candid with us in the gospel to say you are more broken than you could ever think. But he's all the way constant, because he's the only God who says, "I am your friend. And to show you that, I will lay down my life for you so that I can know you forever." Only the gospel truth will humble you and I to break out of these Pop-Tart friendships, to be caring, to be candid, to have the freedom. Why? Here's the thing. You have the freedom to be totally caring for your friends because you can embrace them the way you were embraced. You have the freedom to be completely candid to your friends because you're not living for their expectations. You're not living for their affirmation of you. You know that God has already affirmed you and loves you. You know it. You don't need that from them, so therefore you can be candid. You can be caring, and you can also be constant, and you can say, "I will be here forever for you because my God is there forever for me." Now, practically, as I close, and I'm going to get real practical here. If you look around this room, it's a small group today, but if you look around this room, there are lots of different people from all different walks of life. And this is why Proverbs says that iron sharpens iron. Because it means that when you and I enter into friendships, in light of the gospel, if the gospel's our center, and you and I go into friendships, we can sharpen each other. And what that means is there's going to be sparks. There's going to be disagreements. There's going to be friction. It doesn't say iron polishes iron. It doesn't mean that your friends are supposed to just polish you as you are. And it says, no, your friends will sharpen you. But they'll only sharpen you if you're both humbled by the grace that you were shown. If you can say, like Jonathan, "My soul is knit to you. Where you go, I will go." And very practically, there's a lot of different folks in here. We're all from different places, and we're all going to rub each other the wrong way, and that's a good thing. Do you know this? Because look, who were Jesus' friends? Did Jesus say, "I want to start having friends who are 33 single Jewish males like me? I feel comfortable around 33-year-old single Jewish males, so let's form a club and let's be friends"? No. Jesus' friends were former prostitutes. Jesus' friends were former tax collectors and cheaters and liars and no good people. Those were his friends. He associated with those people. And it's for them and it's for us that he says, I lay down my life for you. Can you not do it for others? Emerson finishes in his poem by saying this, and I should have included it in your outline. You can find it online, but here he says what friends do. If you have a friend who's sharpened you like iron, and if you have a friendship that's radically caring, utterly candid, and foreverly constant, here's what you'll say about friends. Emerson writes, "O friend, my bosom said, through thee alone the sky is arched. Through thee the rose is red. All things through thee take nobler form. And look beyond the earth, me too, thy noblest had taught, to master my despair. The fountains of my hidden life are through thy friendship fair." Do you know that this morning we worship the only God who we can look at and say, the fountains of my hidden life, you know, Lord, how broken, how lonely, how selfish, petty, and self-centered I am. You know the hidden paths of my life, the fountains, but through thy friendship, they're fair. He takes you and me as we are, and he sees the future glorious self that we can be, and he says, you are now my friend. Take some time in silent prayer now. Ask yourself, do you think that this is the friend that you have? And if this is the friend that you have through the gospel, by grace, then can you not be the same friend for others? Let's pray.